Hello everyone, welcome back to the lab. My name is Escher, aka Abstractive, and today's video is how to make music part 2. Now, if you remember in part 1, we talked about the inspiration phase of music production, coming up with ideas, and just planning for creating your first song. Now, for today, what we're going to do is talk about 4 different ways to start a song. Because really, there's infinite ways to start a song, but for the purpose of today, we want something that is easy to start with, and then the fourth way is going to be the most complex because it is starting from scratch. The point is, I could give you step-by-step instructions for creating a specific song, but that's a specific song. So I kind of want to mix it up a little where the first way we'll talk about, which is genre. I will give you a genre to start with, and because we're starting with the genre, there is step-by-step instructions. But what we're really doing is the synonymous stuff that is in every song in that genre. So, best way to think about it is like if I were to give you a recipe to bake a cake, then you're just making that exact cake, and that's not creative. So instead, what I'm doing is I'm going to tell you how to put the cake into the oven and maybe what temperature to set it to. But all the ingredients and all that extra stuff, that's going to be up to you. So to begin, I want to talk first about DAWs, digital audio workstations. I might have mentioned this in the first video, but I want to re-bring it back up for the purpose of today. So your DAW, digital audio workstation, is the software you're going to use to create the music. So, for instance, I use Ableton, and there's other ones. There's FL Studio, Pro Tools, Reaper, which is completely free. I think FL Studio also has a free version, if I remember correctly. Then there's like GarageBand for iOS. I think Caustic for like Android. There's many, many ones. And for the purpose of today, we're going to use one called BandLabs. And the reason is because instead of telling you, figure out what DAW you want to use, buy it, download it, yada, 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 we're going to use one that's fully in the web browser for our very first song. We want it to be as simple as possible. Get rid of all this complex stuff. We're learning. It will take time, but we will get there. Now, after this video, you can, of course, go and do your research and pick which DAW you want and then try it out, try a trial, whatever. Then go to the next one if you don't like it as much. Or you could even, go to a different DAW that I didn't say, like something in a different style, like I think there's one called Reason, maybe. But you could also do ones that are like tracking software. But that's a whole nother video for the future. So for now, we're going to open up BandLabs, and I'll show you how to do that. And we're going to start with the first method of song creation, starting with genre. Okay, so what I want you to do is open up your browser and search for BandLabs, and then press enter. Now, BandLab will come up, make music online. Click that link, and just press get started. Now it's going to ask you to create an account, so I'm going to do that right now. Okay, so now I have started, and I have opened BandLabs, and I'm in my account, and what we're going to do is press this plus button on the top, and press create new project. Now, while this thing loads, I'm going to talk about why we're going to start with a genre, and what genre we're going to start with. So, for today, we're going to start with one of the simplest genres there is. Now, simple doesn't mean bad. There's no bad genres. I mean, there's some that might not sound good to you, but that's a whole nother thing. For today, we're going to talk about house music, because with house music, it has one of the most fundamental drum patterns called 4 on the floor beat, and it is one of the most fundamental drum patterns that you will ever use in music production. A lot of songs use it. A lot of genres use it too. But when you're thinking of house, it is kind of the first thing you think about. So the reason I want to start with this is simple because we are learning. I want to give you something where you follow along with me, you do what I do, and you create something that I create. Now, we're not going to use the same exact drum samples, but of course you could if you want to, make exactly what I make. But the point is we're creating a start for something bigger. And then after we create the drum loop, I can talk about other stuff that is in house music, but really It's just going to be about what do you do next. So my BandLabs has loaded. I'm going to turn us over to there, and we will get started. All right, so when we're here, it gives us a bunch of options, and we don't need to care about any of these. If you want to, you could start with the song template, and that is good if you want to just listen to some examples. But you've probably listened to music in your life, so this is not really important at the moment. Of course, after the fact, if you want to, you can click on the song template and see kind of song structure stuff. But for the moment, we're just carrying down here. We don't care about voice audio. We're not recording our voice instruments. We're not using MIDI at the moment. No sampler, bass, or guitar. We're going to just start with the drum machine as I talked about, 4 on the floor pattern. It's going to be very, very simple. So now we have this beat starter section. And if you want to, you could click Classic House, but I think it's better if you click Empty so that we can start from scratch and you can play along and just, learn by doing. Of course, these are all just different genres and kind of classic BPMs for that genre. But BPM doesn't necessarily define genre, so you can kind of do whatever you want. Next, Okay, so now that the project is loaded, don't allow that. Here is what our main screen looks like. And when you're starting out with music, learning software is important, so you should probably find a full thing on that, or you can just play around. But I'm going to right now give you the basics. Here is the main stuff: play, record if you're like recording something, which we're not going to, so we don't need to press that. Loop, which is for looping. This is just how much time has passed, but you can also change some settings there. This is to go back to the beginning. This is volume level, so you can make the whole track, the whole song quieter, or you can make it louder. We're going to double click it so it's back to 0. This is metronome, which is just, it gives you an audible sound for sound. So like if I press play, you can hear it clicking, and it's clicking at 120 beats per minute. This is our time signature. Again, we don't need to care about anything up here, key or whatever. And honestly, when we press play, we're just going to press the space bar to press play for the moment, because we don't need to care about anything besides just creating a simple pattern. But in any case, to continue on over here, this is mute, this is solo, so you can solo the track. The region things, all you need to know about that is if you make variations in patterns down here where it says A here and then B here, we have A pattern and then B pattern, and you can see switch between them. We're going to delete B by pressing backspace on it and just go to A region. Now over here, all you need to know is this section defines the sounds you're using. Technically in here, it's the instrument and it's the drum kit, which, is basically the way that most DAWs say it, but sometimes you may be using individual sounds instead of a kit. But what I want you to do here is either nothing or click something, but for the purpose of us, I'm just using this drum pad, which is the 808 default one, because I don't want to make things too complex. We're keeping it as simple as possible, limiting the creativity. Then you can break free from that after once you understand the basics. So we don't need to care about this. Swing, don't care about. Bar, that's length. We're not going to care about that. And then this is to add stuff. If we want to add A, we could press A, and then we could add it to here or something. But again, so now we're going to make the basic house pattern. All you need is 3 sounds. Kick, which is A, snare, which is F, and then hi-hat, which is J. And how we're going to do it is we place the hi-hat every single other one. And as you place it, you will hear sound come out. Then you place the kick on every one. Here, 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 there. On every other one. And then on the second one, you will do the snare. And that is it. Now if we press play, you will hear the basic house pattern. 4 on the floor. Dead simple, easy to to understand house pattern. Now, if we click up here and then we press play, we'll hear our metronome. Let's turn that off. But it's playing through the region. There you go. You've made a basic house pattern. Okay, so we just talked about a simple drum pattern, 4 on the floor, for house music. And now we're going to talk about a second possible way to start a song, which we'll use BandLabs again. Of course, we'll come back to our house pattern or whichever of these 4 ways to start a song you choose to use for today's video. We'll come back to it and we'll, continue the song from there. But for now, I just want to talk about the 4 different ways. So, method number 2 is basically going from an idea. Now, this way and the next way are kind of interchangeable in terms of difficulty, but instead of following here's the genre, here's how to make the pattern, go from there, we're starting without something that we know how to put down. We know exactly how to make a house pattern, but with an idea, we might not know exactly what to do. So for this part, we're not going to put anything into the DAW. Well, I'm not going to. You can, of course, because you have the ideas. But the point of this part is talking about how do you take an idea and write it down. Now, I have had many songs where I've had no ideas at all. And then I've had some where I have had ideas. So I don't have a perfect, way to tell you what to do. It's really an experimentational thing. So let's say you have an idea for vocals. Let's start there. With that, that's simple. You record your vocals down in whatever format you want. Keeping it simple to start is great because, you're learning your first song, whatever. I typically don't do vocals. I mean, on my song Drive, I did, but that was a sample on Splice. But if you're good at singing, great for you. You can put those vocals down, and then you can treat it later on with effects if you want. But get your idea down, whether that be vocals, whether that be a synth you kind of like the sound of, a pattern, something rhythmic, whatever it may be. Get it down into BandLabs. So here's what I'll do. We'll open up BandLabs and I'll just show you how to add some extra stuff just so you can do that. So let me swap over to there. So I'm no pro at BandLabs. I haven't used it infinite amount of times. I've used it enough to get a general idea of how to use it. But basically, let's say you have a idea or you want to record audio or something. All you do is you add a new track, you do voice audio, select the device, and then it will be here. Then you can add in like auto pitch and all this stuff, which is really cool. Again, you can then change it if you have a different idea you want to start with. Like if we delete this one and we want a new track that is like a virtual instrument or something, then we can do that. And now we got a piano. So again, choose what idea, if you have an idea or maybe you have some inspiration from another song, and figure out exactly how you're going to put that down. Again, it's just keep it simple. So when I say an idea, I don't mean like an idea for a full song just yet. Of course, keep that in the back of your mind, but a lot of times you won't end up exactly where you want to start. So I just want you to get down like one breath, one single thing, whether it be a drum pattern, vocals, whatever it may be, and we'll talk about continuing from there in a moment. Now, for the third way to start, we are going to talk about sample or sound. So this is a little bit different. I mean, it's hand in hand in some ways. Like when you're talking about sound, it could be like you have a MIDI instrument or a piano that you really like the sound of or something and you want to use. And by the way, a MIDI instrument is just a way of saying an instrument on the computer. Like if it's like you have a physical guitar, but it's on the computer. That's what MIDI instrument is. It's a bit more complex than that, but I want to keep it simple. So they can go interchangeably because if you have an instrument It could be an idea also, but sometimes you don't have an idea, you just have an instrument you like the sound of. So for us, for our purposes, we're going to just like use a sample. So I have a app called Splice, which is what I use for all my samples. It's like a giant sample library. People upload samples, you can download them. It's relatively cheap for what it's worth. And what we're going to do is just grab a random sample from my Splice library. So let me swap over to Splice. Here's my Splice. Basically, it's just an app for samples. And this is how I get my samples typically. So for number 3, starting with a sample, we're going to grab a sample that I know, which is this shaker sample. It says house, tech house, percussion, shaker, whatever. That's all the descriptors for it. I'm going to mute you by turning the volume down and just listen to this. We have a sample. Now, I made this, 4 ways to start a song thing to be, kind of a progression. But really, it's like the starting it is very simple. You find what you want and you put it down. So with a sample, just think about what sample you want to use. If you want to start with a sample, that is. Of course, if you have an idea or a sample you already know you want to use, put that in your DAW, put it in BandLabs, whatever, and we'll go from there. Now, there's many different things you could do with it, but for the purposes of right now, when we're just talking about the 4 different ways to start, we're going to just leave it as be. And we're going to go to the final way to start. Future Escher here. It occurs to me I've done a bad job explaining the starting. So let me try and just do this again as a wrap-up. So when you're starting from the starting points that I listed, starting with a genre, a idea, a sound/sample, or from scratch, it's all about just getting something down, something simple to start. And that could be anything. So for like genre, we talked about house music, so we did the 4-on-the-4 pattern. Simple. That's all you need to do to start there. Now, when you get into stuff like ideas, figure out what your idea is and then try and place it down. And now it's really about, for us in this section, it's not here's the intro to the song. It's more so here's our first idea. So play around a bunch with that idea. This is one of those things where it's so difficult to give you, correct answers and exact instructions because it's all about being creative and playing. Of course, if I was like, we're going to make a heavy rock song, follow along with me, then I'd tell you, take your guitar loop or something and put an amplifier on it or boost it up, give it some crunch. I don't know. The point is, for our purposes, it's about you figuring out what works. And, in BandLabs, you have some options for that. You can add effects and things. But when you're starting with, like, an idea, it's about place your idea down, maybe add some effects to get your first sound, quote unquote. And then when you're working with sample or sound, maybe you chop the sample, maybe you change the pitch, which the pitch is kind of just like if it's a higher thing or if it's a lower thing, something like that. It's just this game of tweaking and tweaking until you find something that works. And then for the last way, the starting from scratch, that one is exactly the same thing. All right, back to the video. All right, so now we're on to the hardest way to start a song. And also, in some ways, the easiest way to start a song. Now, this is my preferred method because I am chaotic and I don't really have too much inspiration. Now, of course, I listen to so much music that everything is inspiration. But there's not that many times where I'm able to be like, I love this song, I want to make something similar, and I'm able to do it. A lot of times, it's a game of trying things and seeing what works. So, for instance, if I open up Ableton on some days, I will just scroll through the sound library, listen to stuff, be like, that's kind of interesting, then I'll play around with a random thing on my keyboard. Now, technically that is starting with sound, but, you could even do stuff where you start with like Serum or Vital, which is a VST plugin. And all you need to know about VST is they are like extras that you can download from the internet to add to your DAW. I don't think they work with BandLab. Maybe they do. But they're basically just like fancy little extra things that you don't need, but can do things that some of the defaults in your DAW can't do. So Serum and Vital are wavetable oscillators slash they're ways to make complex sounds. Essentially, it's a bit more complex than that, but I don't want to overwhelm you with all these fancy things. So the point is, you make sounds in there using waves like sine waves, and basically what I do is sometimes I will play around and just make a bunch of crazy random things, and then from there I have an idea of how to start a song. Now, technically it's not how to start a song, start as in here's the intro, but it's more so I have a starting idea and I build from that idea. Now, for the purpose of this video, we're going to then go from the beginning again with our drum pattern and figure out what's next. So let me go back to BandLabs and talk about next steps. Okay, so we're in BandLabs. I'm going to delete this track. We have a drum pattern, which has a sound. For some reason, it is not playing because it's muted. So let's send this back up to 0 as best as we can. There's probably a better way to do this, but again, I barely use this software. So there we go. We have a drum pattern. Now, when we're talking about how to continue from where we are, there's a few things we can do. We could, of course, listen to a bunch of house music and try and recreate exactly that. I think that's great, but also I like doing things on my own, and a lot of times I like being creative, so I'm doing stuff that maybe isn't typical. So obvious stuff we could do. We could change BPM if we want to do that, change time signature. But for now, let's just add a second thing on top of this thing that we already have. So let's press add track and figure out what we want next. Now, we could do a sample if we want to, or guitar, bass, whatever it may be. I'm going to do a virtual instrument. Now, when we're building a track, it's all about the direction you're taking it. So we have this first sample, and one thing we could do is we could start with this, but we could also come to it later, which is, where does this drum pattern go? Where in the song do we hear it? Is it the first thing we hear? Do we start the song off like this? Maybe. That's okay. We could start that way. Or maybe there's something else that happens, 2 bars here. Technically not 2 bars, but just like 2 before. So maybe what we want is some piano pattern. So I'm going to create a piano pattern, and I'll just drag it to be this length. And then maybe I'll put in some notes or something that sound, I don't know. Again, we're playing around, we're fooling around, we're having fun. There is no real answer to this, but it's just about how you want to do things. So let me go to this mode and see how this sounds. Pretty boring, whatever. It's okay to be boring. Again, there's no reason to be perfect. It's just experimentation, figuring out what sounds interesting, what doesn't, and there's no right answers because everyone's music is different and all valid. So maybe I do a little variation like this. Cool, whatever. Now I'm going to just actually go here and duplicate this move bookmark. That's not what I want. Don't remember how to do that. Copy and paste or something. Never mind. See, I do not know this software that well. I wish I did, because then this video would be better. But I'm so used to Ableton that like things throw me off when I'm not used to the right software. Point is, there is a pattern. I'm going to add in one more note, and then we can put this here just to see how it sounds like on the drums. I don't know. What is happening? Okay. Sounds pretty bad. And that is great. I hope that your first song was bad, because then then that's a good thing, and there's a lot of space to learn. If it's really good to begin with, then that's annoying on my part, because I've spent years making music and it's still not that good. But if you're a natural, good for you. The point is, we have a second part, and in this video, I'm not going to make an entire song in BandLabs because I like Ableton so much. But from here, you just figure out, how does the song start? How does it end? What are the parts in between? So in a typical song structure, you might have something like intro, then maybe there's a chorus, verse, whatever. Build up, drop, if it's one of those genres that has a drop. Some don't, like ambient music, or if you're in rock, sometimes it doesn't have a drop, something like that. There's so many genres that I could list off many, but the point is some have, some don't. And then after the drop, you could redo the first section again, and then go to another drop, and maybe do something different, whatever. Again, it doesn't matter. There's no specific answer, and there's no specific way to do it. Point is, experiment and figure out what works for you and what sounds good for your song. The best way to think about it is, you're not really making the song is making itself. But you are using your mind as a creative way to figure out what it wants. So, like some songs, like you give a song to a different person, it'll sound different, but the song has a flow. So if you follow the flow, it kind of makes sense. In any case, let me swap back over to talking mode. Okay, so we opened BandLabs. We talked about just starting a song in 4 different ways. This has been very, very chaotic, and for that I'm sorry. This video has taken forever, and I just kind of wanted to be done with it. I hope it teaches you a little something. I don't know. The whole point is, there's no answer. There's no right answer. You can make music however you want, and that is perfectly valid. Don't worry about failure. That is going to happen, and that is great. If your song sucks, that is great. You have room to learn. The best way to think about it is like this. There is only a certain amount of ways you can fail. And if you fail so hard, where you're out of options, the only thing left is to succeed. So, keep on making bad music, and eventually you'll be happy with what you make, and you'll create amazing, amazing things. This has been Escher in the lab. I'm out. Peace.